Okay, and we are live. Hello, everyone. My name is George, Managing Director at Minucia. Thank you very much for joining us today and tuning in. We have Alexander with us. The first time we had Alexander with us was as a guest on our podcast. So it's been a while since then, and I will, read a small intro. So Alexander Rehnborg is the head of SEO at GetResponse with more than 6 years of experience as an SEO lead. He dives daily into data processing and filtering and is passionate about the intersection of language and marketing data. He has extensive experience in turning numbers into insights for a larger audience. And I don't know, I was very curious when I saw the title of your presentation to see what this webinar is going to be about. So Alexander, welcome, and excited about today's webinar.
Thank you so much, George. It's going to be a pleasure.
We can get started.
All right.
The stage is all yours.
Thank you very much. Data-driven or data-deceived is the topic of today. How well do we walk the talk within SEO when it comes to how we use data? It's going to be very interesting to talk about that, and I very much look forward to tough, interesting, challenging questions at the end of the session. And I work at GetResponse, which, by the way, right now has its 25-year-old anniversary. I wish I could say I'm 25. That's not the case, though. But happy to be part of the team there. So let's jump right into it. And we're going to start with an area that I think concerns most of us, if not all of us, because if there's one tool that all SEO specialists are logging into daily, it's Google Search Console. And a lot of people like to use it as one source of truth because, hey, it's Google, right? What could go wrong? But there are many places and points in Search Console that can lead us astray. So I'm going to try to give you a few examples of that. And here's one that I see quite a bit. It happens a lot in my team. We look at the performance data for one landing page, and suddenly we see that there is a drop. And most people freak out, and they say, okay, so we lost a lot of rankings, something is going on, this page is not doing great anymore. But I think that we're going to do a lot today is to ask ourselves a follow-up question. And in this case, we're going to start with asking, do all losses matter? We lost rankings. Yeah, clearly something went wrong, but does it matter to us? So diving deeper here, I looked at the period when we started to see a decline, and I compared that versus the previous period to see what type of positions that we actually lost for which topics. And what I came up with is this. So 62% of all the position drops, they ranked below top 10, right? So already from the get-go, I have 62% of keywords that dropped, yes, but they were never ranking in top 10, and therefore likely not driving a lot of traffic. So already we have a lot of noise. And secondly, what about the keywords that did decline? Well, they led to a whopping reduction of 3 clicks. Yeah, I said 3 clicks, and that's basically it. You can see across the whole time period, we're talking about thousands of clicks. This doesn't concern me as much. So now when I have more context to this data, I don't feel so worried anymore. Okay, how come then we lost so much rankings? Or rather, what were the core topics for this page? How come we didn't lose more clicks? So for this particular page, we claimed a featured snippet in German Google for the equivalent of landing page cost, as you can see here. Now, when I looked at and zoomed in on all the keywords here that are related to cost, and particularly to this keyword here, you could see that we held our ground fairly well. Yeah, true, there was some more instability over time, but we still were claiming the snippet at least every second day. And in fact, the search demand, as you can see later on in the year, actually increased. Therefore, the clicks increased. So it made up for whatever losses we might have suffered. Yeah, the conclusion was that keywords that related to cost, which we owned really well, the cost of building landing pages, of course, they were unaffected, but they represented half of all the traffic. So you can see that just by looking at the ranking position for one landing page, seeing a drop and digging just slightly deeper, we realize there's nothing really to see here. Let's move on. Okay, what about another case? What about click-through rate tanking, which happens from time to time? So here we had a concrete scenario where a page was really stable over time, but suddenly, as you can see, impressions shot up and the rankings shot up. But click-through rate dropped, which is kind of unusual because if you increase your ranking position, normally you should be seeing better click-through rate. So again, we ask ourselves the question, which we need to do. Which keywords drove the changes in position and impressions? Only then do we know if the loss in click-through rate is something alarming. And when we dug deeper, we saw that we started to enter top 10 for huge topics such as AOL mail. And as you can see, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of impressions that suddenly shot up on the dashboard by us merely increasing 2-3 positions at best. Now, we're in the business of email marketing, but we're certainly not in business of competing with AOL. And as you might have guessed, AOL as a topic or AOL mail, it's completely branded. It's primarily branded in any case. And it's not something that we're shooting for. And yet we are there. It was possible, thanks to Google, making the choice that one of our help pages deserved to be in top 10. In this case, why you shouldn't be using a Yahoo or an AOL mail when you do email marketing. And just as a small side note, by the way, if anyone's doing that right now, you probably should stop because in early next year, Google, so Gmail, and Yahoo will introduce new deliverability requirements. You should no longer send emails from custom domains, from Gmail and Yahoo addresses. You need to use a custom domain. Otherwise, you'll end up in the spam. So that's good to know. Just a side note. But so this kind of irrelevant help page gained traction for a huge head turn. And it messed with the data, essentially. Note also here, and this is just a part of it, of course, but note thousands of people doing a site search for our main domain. I don't think that that's a human behavior. That looks like we're talking about bots or possibly ranking tools, but it's just noise in the data. And entering top 10, as interesting as it may be for the Italian version of Yahoo, yeah, it's not the type of traffic that we're looking for. So you can imagine why the click-through rate tanked. We had no interest in getting all of these impressions. And a lot of times you will see in Search Console that you have a lot of visibility for terms that you would never want to rank for, which means that you need to move away from landing page level data. And that is the key takeaway here for now. Landing page level data is so common for SEOs to use in reporting and analysis, but you need to dig deeper. There's so much noise in the data and you can really be led astray. You need to, at the very least, single out the topics, the queries, the keywords that you're interested in. Otherwise, you're not going to see the full picture. Okay, moving from a more related area, checking rankings. This should be the bread and butter of the SEO industry at this point. I don't know how many years and decades we've been tracking positions. And yet, we're arguing and debating internally in teams. Are we position 5? Are we position 15? How do we get closer to some type of semblance of truth? So here's one example that can start us off. This was a product page for a newly released product. We were, of course, really anxious to see it grow, which it didn't kind of do for a while. And then suddenly it came, right? We had 2 mountains shooting up with both clicks and click-through rate. And we were really happy to see that. And that's exactly what you want to see when you promote a new product. You want to see that page taking off to get people to see the product. Ranking take off? Yes? No? I'm sorry to say, but no. In fact, when we looked at the average position, the positions went down. So we lost rankings consistently, and yet we had more clicks and we had more click-through rate, we had high click-through rate. How is this really possible? I mean, how do you kind of combine a performance boom with dropping in rankings? In Search Console, everything is possible. You need to double check. So that's exactly what we did. The data didn't make sense to us. So we went to a second one. At the time, we were using SERPstat to check rankings. And as you can see, here we saw a completely different picture. So the first big bounce in traffic came late February. We entered top 10. We were number 8. And then a second time, 11th of March, Google gave us mercy again, and we were into top 10. For a keyword that had 90,000 search volume, and that's an estimate which we know is really off, that means a lot of traffic. This is super interesting and important for me as a content marketer, because if I don't know that our product page deserved, in Google's eyes, to enter top 10, how am I going to inform our business strategy? Should I spend more time on it or not? This is crucial information for me. So Search Console gave us a blip on the map, but it was way off. You need to have a second tool to check when you check visibility in SEO. It's really crucial. And a Google Search Console is really not a great place to check positions overall. Remember, they are saying average position. And as you can see, sudden movements up and down, yeah, they can be wrong. Another example to get closer to the truth when it comes to visibility is that we need to learn to use more contextual data when we look at visibility. We can't just look at one single ranking position from one tool. So here's an example, a Polish example, Lake Marketingowe, which is the equivalent of marketing funnel, something that is close to our product. We are consistently ranking very well for that topic, as you can see. But just sharing this data with you guys doesn't really give it enough depth. What does it really mean to be number 1 for this term? Here we're trying to use another tool called Advanced Web Ranking, which we're using today. The nice thing about this tool is that it allows us to insert more data. So yes, it is correct. This tool confirms that we are number 1, just like Search Console says. But look at the contextual data. Notice the click-through rate, 3.12. I mean, measly 3%, and we're on number 1. And the searches are at least 800 a month. Doesn't make sense. Take a look also at the pixel position, like a really nice feature here. Because it is green, because we are in 360 pixels, I know on mobile that we are above fold. And yet the click-through rate is so low. Well, the answer is, of course, not in the pudding, but in the SERP, I guess. Looking at the scraped SERP from this tool, we can see, yeah, we are number 1, but we are now number 1 in an image carousel. So unless somebody swipes or clicks through onwards to our image, we're not going to get that click. And depending on what the search intent for this query is, we're probably not going to get many clicks at all. 3% sounds actually pretty fair to me when I see the reality. And this is the case for so many pieces of data in Search Console. When you see your number 1, your number 2, your number 3, it's so often that you don't see the traffic return, simply because we're talking about different types of results. At this point, it feels a bit stupid to call it non-traditional results, because nowadays Google is serving way more than just the traditional 10 blue links. But yeah, case in point, mentally in the industry, we like to still believe that all the rankings are equal, but they're not. And they do skew the performance data. So every time you look at visibility and you make a big deal out of it, maybe you even send out a report to your manager, make sure that you have double-checked the data and that you understand what the rankings mean. Okay, so that's a kind of quick sum of the Search Console. To be honest, there's a lot more to dig into. I could spend an hour talking about Search Console, but we have more topics to cover. So the next one is slightly different. Our love for vanity metrics. What's a vanity metric? I think the image here kind of sums up what it's all about. Vanity metric, at least in my mind, is a metric that sounds good, pleasant to use, but the significance and the importance of it might be questionable. And the real question is, are we using these metrics in the right way? So let me give you some examples. We love scores in the industry. And I think one reason for it is that working with search marketing, it's a very ambiguous field. Nobody truly knows how Google works, obviously. Probably not even Google itself at this point, which means that we like to hold on to anything that is concrete. And when you spend some dollars on a SEO SaaS software that tells you this and that, and it gives you scores, it gives you metrics, this is something that we can hold on to. And in the industry, we love this. The question is if this obsession is healthy. So let me give you a few examples. Here, we have done an SEO audit inside Ahrefs. Maybe not the primary user case for this software, but nonetheless, you can do it. Now, I can see that when I ran this audit, I had a health score of 93. So it sounds like my website is alive and well. And if I was a junior specialist trying to learn the trade, maybe I'd be happy receiving this report. The question is, what does it really say? So if we put the joy aside, health score, right? What is it actually? Well, according to Ahrefs, it reflects the proportion of internal URLs that don't have errors. Okay, that's a very simplistic definition, granted. And I can see that I have relatively fewer errors. I do see that I have over 30,000 warnings, though. That doesn't seem to be on the picture. Let's put that aside for now. Let's focus on the errors. My question is, okay, I have about 1,200 errors. What type of errors are we talking? Shouldn't that go into the scoring? So, taking a deep dive, before we fix the problems, I'm happy to say, the first issue that I saw was that we had systematically broken Ahrefs lengths in help content. And this is a big problem for us because we tend to roll out lots of new help pages on a weekly basis. We update them. Sometimes we have availability in certain languages, but not in others, depending on the availability of translators. Then it's really, really crucial for indexation that Google quickly finds all the linked pages through Ahrefs lengths. And if it's systematically broken, that's a problem. And that's exactly what we had. That is not a health score of 93 in my book. Okay, what about something else? Well, there was something that was worse in my mind. We were internally linking from product content to pages that didn't exist. So we had systematically broken internal linking language-wise from crucial content, because for a SaaS company like us, product content is bread and butter. And we spend a lot of time getting links, getting PR, getting authority for those pages. And if all that link equity and trust goes out the window to 404 pages, that's a waste. So just by looking at these two errors, it's hard to say that this website would deserve any kind of ranking of 93 out of 100 based on these errors, yeah? But still, that's what the tool spits out. And there's so many examples of this. And there's still lots of SEO agencies and their teams doing reports and audits, taking these scores and communicating them. Where's the context? And to be honest, guys, if we screw up sometimes, Google is no better, to be honest. This is Google PageSpeed Insights, obviously. And you have basically two different data sets there. You have the crux data, the lab data from real Chrome users, and you have the Lighthouse data, which is, of course, test data, not from real users. But you get a score, and people love scores. SEOs love scores. In this case, our homepage had a score of 54. Now, that doesn't sound so good. But the question is, have we ever bothered to figure out what does the score actually stand for? How is it calculated? We're out of time, usually. We're busy, so we don't have time to do that. But if you would take the time to look, you will see that for Lighthouse 10, these are the metrics and these are the proportions that make out the score. There are so many things one could say about this, but I guess I have two main complaints here. From my standpoint, from our website, largest contentful paint and cumulative layout shift are equally important in the scoring. Now, if you go to absolutely most websites on the web right now, what is the single biggest core web vital issue? It's the largest contentful paint. And yet, cumulative layout shift gets equal importance. Doesn't make sense. A lot of sites don't have problems with that. And when we talk about core web vitals, where's first input delay? I don't see it here. Well, it's not included. So if you thought that the score reflected your core web vitals performance, you were wrong. But I don't blame you, because it's poorly communicated by Google. And frankly, a lot of us take shortcuts and use scores. And again, how often do we see SEO audits and reports using the scores, which don't necessarily reflect the accurate performance of the page? Now, the next one, it's a bit hurtful, because who can take a stab at Screaming Frog? That's just mean. They're doing great work, but they also tend to fall for some of these vanity metrics, to be honest. So probably many of you have noticed that there is this metric called link score. It's been around for years, to be honest. I don't know how many of you guys use it, but it's there. It tries to put a score on the power of internal linking for each page, which sounds helpful in theory. But if you go to read their documentation, and this is their own documentation, this is what they write. We introduced our own link score algorithm. So far, so good, to help users such as us identify the importance of URLs. But they also go on saying that the link score values themselves aren't very useful. And the bigger the site is, the smaller the values, and therefore it's hard to interpret the metrics. So why would I be using this in my report? I don't know. I'm not saying that the link score is not useful. I've also used it, but the question is, what does it really tell us if we don't have additional metrics to compare it with? And if we don't truly understand how link score here is calculated, and Screaming Frog themselves say they don't calculate it in a good way, I don't know if this is the best metric that we could be using. And yet we use it. But perhaps the area in SEO that's most contested when it comes to vanity metrics, it's probably link building. Well, there's so much to say in this topic, but let's try to keep to something simple. Still, a lot of people are worried about what we can call toxic links. Toxic links, meaning links that could give you a manual penalty. Doesn't really happen so often anymore, but it does happen. And how do we get hold of toxic links? But also, what is a toxic link? How do we define that? A lot of times we leave that definition up for the software vendors. And I think that's a mistake. So I borrowed some examples here from Mary Haynes, because she's very active in the link building sphere for decades, really. And this is one really good example what could come out of a software today. So she was subscribing to SEMrush. She got this email. It says, subject line, backlink audit update, warning, penalty risk is increasing. Wow, that certainly has my interest now. Yeah, you got a red CTA and say you got to take action on these 5 toxic links to prevent search engines from punishing you. Think about people who are new to the industry, who have a user account with SEMrush. They will want to look at this. The question is, what lies behind 5 toxic domains? So in her case, all of the examples were automated spam. Spam that every single website on the web has and receive on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, but that's the reality. Now, if we are to trust Google, and I can add that, of course, you do need to take what they say with a grain of salt. I don't think we should take what they say at absolute value. But they've been saying for years, and it's not just Google, that what about disavowing? What about toxic links? Well, as long as you're not buying links, if you only get automated spam, we're kind of smart. We understand that that's automated spam. We understand that if every website receives the spam, we're probably not going to give you a manual penalty at the very least. If you weren't buying links, don't disavow, John said in June. And Bing went even further. I don't know if you guys saw that. This was from September this year. Bing is going to remove their disavow tool. To quote Bing, we don't need you to tell us which links are spammy. That's a cocky move. But it kind of goes home to the basic point. When we talk about toxic links, and there are so many softwares that sell this, that monetize this, some only focus exactly on this area, what are we really acting on? If we're spending most of our time looking at automated spam, disavowing, putting more and more disavow into the disavow list until we can no longer put more domains, is that a worthwhile usage of our time today, 2023? And to go back to the point of toxic link, to quote John, if you weren't buying links, don't disavow. Now, he might be lying, but what we do know is that you can receive a manual penalty if you break the Google Webmaster Guidelines. What do the guidelines say? You're not allowed to pay for links. So in other words, if you spend a lot of money and time to buy a perfect guest post with high quality content, a perfect looking anchor back to your website, but you actually pay for that and you do that on scale, I don't know, or to boost your rankings, that is by definition a toxic link because it has inherent risk. I mean, this is nothing new. We know that link building comes with inherent risks. And like all marketers, we need to take risks to win something. But the point here is, how many of these link softwares would ever flag a so-called high-quality guest post link as a toxic link? Well, the answer is no. But they're very good at caching automated spam. Spam that Google most likely tends to forget. So we have come to the third and final part of this presentation. I've given you some examples of how our favorite tool, Google Search Console, sometimes messes with us. And I'm also giving you some examples of metric scores that might not be so useful unless you use them in the right context. So let's try to be a bit more productive. Let me try to give you 4 ways so that you truly can become more data-driven in your daily work. And the first one is a more personal one. And I call it, if you don't know, don't show. The first time I ever had the opportunity to communicate the impact of my SEO work for the board of directors, I used a metric that was called SEO visibility. As you can hear, it is one of those kind of vanity metrics. To me, it made sense because I had managed to increase the visibility percentages by a couple of percentage points in certain areas that were important to us commercially. So I was confident about the results. And instead of showing a graph or a table of 100 different keywords that were going up and down, I wanted to use a simple metric, so I used SEO visibility. And the answer that I got from the CEO was, I don't understand any of this. What are you talking about? Presentation over. No kidding. And this was one of the best lessons that I had early on in my career, because it taught me something. If I have a problem to articulate what I'm communicating, what I'm showing on my slides, if I'm showing you a report from a software, but I can't really explain or answer any follow-up questions, maybe I shouldn't be using that in the first place. And today, honestly, if I was put in the same situation, probably I would have shown maybe 5-10 keywords that I know the CEO is Googling every day because he's as interested in SEO as I was. And I would be sharing the results of those 5-10 keywords. That's a very simplistic report, you may say. Yeah, I agree. But you know what? It's better to show something that means something to your audience than to talk about something that only you know, but the recipient don't understand. A lot of the vanity metrics we just looked at, such as Lighthouse score, if you don't truly know what it means to have a Lighthouse score going from 45 to 65, I don't know. Maybe don't use it in the report. Maybe use it only in your analysis work. If you don't know it, don't show it. Secondly, we have an abundance of tool in our industry. We're obsessed about tools. And a lot of times within agencies and within teams, we use multiple tools for the same purpose. That might have some legitimacy, but the problem is, where do we look when we are reporting and sharing things? We just saw, when it comes to ranking position, that you get completely different data depending on which tool you use. So using the right tool for the right purpose is key, and at least settling for something that works. And something I see a lot is even people who want to report on their own in-house website, instead of using Google Analytics or the equivalent analytics software, they use SEMrush or Ahrefs or something that tries to estimate the traffic. It just doesn't make sense. So I don't know if you've ever taken the time to compare the traffic data between these tools, because it's really fascinating. So we had this product that we launched, and we had a new product page, and we were tracking the organic traffic for that page. And we started with Google Analytics. At the time, it was universal, just the FYI. And as you can see, as of May, we started to get traffic And it's in a gradual, slow-paced, but still stable way, we increase the traffic month over month. What about Search Console? Well, Search Console greatly underestimated the traffic. It was constantly lagging behind. It never really lived up to the numbers we saw in GA. Why? Well, we know the reasons. There's data sampling, which partly now you can bypass by extracting from BigQuery. But we also know that Google obfuscates clicks because of privacy reasons. I mean, who knows at the end? But the data isn't complete. That's for certain. But more alarmingly, Search Console consistently underestimates brand traffic. And brand traffic is the bread and butter of us as a SaaS company. I mean, we thrive on that. So leaving out those clicks, not good. What about a third-party tool, such as Ahrefs, that tries to estimate the traffic based on its own dynamic database of keywords? Well, as you can expect, estimates its estimates. It's not reality. What was interesting was that Ahrefs did a decent job, but they lagged behind. Suddenly, when you see a movement on a page, you suddenly shoot up in rankings and traffic. It will take time for software such as Ahrefs, SEMrush, and others to catch up. That's why it's not a good place to go to if you're checking your own pages. And again, they always underestimate brand traffic. So you can see here that depending on if we're looking at the competitor website or our own website, we should be using different tools. There is a right and wrong to a certain degree here. And in other fields where it's more subjective, we need to be comparing this data and see where do we get most accurate data. A lot of people are using the tool that they're used to be using, or they like the user interface. And that's understandable. We're emotional creatures as humans. But this talk is about how we become data-driven. And if you want to be data-driven, you need to try to put stuff aside. Thirdly, we've now looked at how to get a better hold of data, but the data needs to be put into context a lot of times. And I would say a lot of our work within SEO is really to put data into context, to not just swallow it as it is, because then just about anyone could be doing this job. So here's one kind of practical example. It's a more technical example. We were recently updating our sitemap and our footer. And once we did that, we wanted to find out, of course, after we switched the sitemaps and the footer, did we manage to funnel more link equity to the pages that deserve it? And did we tone down the pages that we don't think matter so much? So there are different ways to go about that. But if we would start with what we can call the vanity metric here, which is in rank, it is the equivalent of a link score in Screaming Frog, but we were using OnCrawl. We could, of course, see that the score changed before and after the change. And that could very well be the end report. Hey, look, we increased the in-rank score. Something good came out of the change. But is that really enough? Again, we need to ask ourselves a follow-up question. What does it mean? Well, for once, we kind of need to look at click depth. Did we get closer to the homepage or not? That makes a big difference. And secondly, did we get more in-links or less in-links to this page? There will be more metrics that could be added here, but you kind of get the point. If I really want to make a change internally to internal linking on our website, I want to be looking at more than one metric, and I want to compare the metrics side by side. The context is what matters here. Without it, the change in score from 5 to 8 doesn't really say much. And again, picture yourself that you're in the shoes of the person receiving the report or reading your analysis. They might be asking, so why did we increase? You need to have an answer. You will find if you're an analyst. Now, some of you might be saying now, okay, but it sounds like it takes a lot of time to do this. Why don't we just go for the shortcut solution? Well, we can also put that into the context of, I guess, a growing worry, just based off the searches I see in Google. Will robots take our jobs? I guess not tomorrow. But I can tell you one thing for certain. One sure way of keeping your job in the future is to not be a robot yourself. And I really mean that. There is so much of this industry, in our industry, that we copy and paste data, solutions, reports, and we just hand it over. For instance, page speed optimization, like a very concrete task. How often do we not pay for from agencies, or we work internally inside our teams? We just put a URL inside Google Page Speed Insights, and we copy and paste the recommendations from Google. But this is child's play. Anyone can do that. The real question is, have you verified the data? Is it correct? Is it relevant to your business? All of these recommendations? What about your experience? In your experience, which of these recommendations really move the needle? That's what you're being paid for, not to copy and paste. And to follow up and be really concrete, this is a common example. So reduced unused JavaScript. Well, Google, I already asynced or I deferred some of the scripts, so you don't need to tell me off. Google won't see that, so it's giving me this recommendation. And this is one of the problems with Lighthouse. So again, you need to dig deeper, and you need to see what's behind the recommendation, and you need to look at the data. Reduce the impact of third-party code. Well, yeah, that's actually usually a good suggestion. The thing is that almost every website, I dare say, has a third-party script. If not for analytics tracking, for ads tracking, for A and B testing. And if you would suddenly just reduce the impact of that code, I'm sure your marketing colleagues would call you out the next day. So you need to do a review, and you need to go through each script. You need to check it and see, can we really remove Google Analytics 4 or Tag Manager? I don't think so, even though Google recommends it. Again, this is what we're being paid for, to know and to check. Reduce the JavaScript execution time, minimize main thread work. Well, I'm not a developer, so I would need to discuss this with our senior developers. They may say that this is not something that's doable, or the effort is way too big versus the win. So again, we need to check, we need to analyze. And lastly, and this always pops up, you got to improve your caching policy. I mean, this is a standard thing that always shows up. It shows up because not every website has this on every script, but to be honest, it's not a big deal. At least on our website, most of the people visiting are new, so the caching won't do anything for them. And also, Googlebot doesn't cache, so they're not going to really care about that. So again, looking at this, we need to be critical about the data we get from these tools. We can't just swallow them and copy and paste. And that is the work that we need to put in. And I can tell you it will take some time before robots is going to get that. Finally, I want to leave you with this. How many times have you caught yourself saying this to yourself or hearing a colleague saying it? I accept the data if it supports whatever we plan to do already. Yeah, self-confirmation bias. Isn't it great? The truth is that the self-deception is always the ultimate deception. Like, we've looked at different ways to use the tools in a smarter way to avoid the pitfalls of picking data from Search Console. You can follow all of these recommendations, and it will be all for naught if you still keep saying to yourself, I'm only going to show what looks good. This is what the number one lie that all of us do in marketing, in sales, in most teams. We need to look at data critically, and we need to dare to look at data that doesn't show good results. Sometimes the page speed do drop. Sometimes the traffic does drop. It's our job to come up with a plan how to combat that. That is why we're here doing this work. You can always show glorified reports, and SEO software vendors know this. They're experts at generating shiny PDFs with colors, animations, and scores that make it seem like we improved the score from 50 to 60. And we can share that with our manager and say, hey, we did something. But the bottom line always matters. And we need to look at what's behind the scores. Did we actually make a difference? Or did we just improve vanity? So look at yourself, look at the data skeptically and critically. That is the golden rule for always becoming data-driven. Let's walk the talk. Let's do it. It's all about the attitude. It's all about the knowledge, and we can do it. Thank you so much for listening, guys.
Alexander, let me just say that this was great. I really enjoyed the presentation. The slides were like polished. Well done. Well done. I really appreciate this. I have a couple of things to say. and let's see if there are any questions from the audience. But the first point, I was taking some notes as you were presenting, and the first note is that most metrics from tools like Ahrefs or Screaming Frog that you mentioned should be taken with a grain of salt, right? For example, let's take the metric of search volume. Ahrefs cannot track, as you mentioned, sudden movements or track trends because what they do is they use averages, right, for the last 12 months for search volume, for example. And so, you will not see a trend picking up in Ahrefs, and thus, like, this is an opportunity for you to jump on this train and so on. I don't know what your thoughts are, even though you outlined your thoughts during the presentation. But when it comes to SEO metrics from tools, always take them with a grain of salt, and I would say add context so that, add context to any conversation you may have.
Yeah, I totally agree. Search volume is actually a very good example, George. And one thing that is fun to do is take the search volume of any tool, like Google Ads tool, Ahrefs, SEMrush, whatever you use, and compare it to the impressions that you see in Search Console. Actually, you will find that the impression data in Search Console is much better than the averages from Google. So if you truly want to know how many people to search for your brand or an important product of yours, I would compare the data sets from the third-party clickstream tools, which do a great job, but then also compare it with Search Console. And you'll see that there are major differences. And the data is always bigger. Like the actual search volume is typically much bigger. One part of that is also, some people still don't want to touch keywords that have no search volume because they kind of learn that SEO is all about driving traffic. But like you hinted at, George, the data is sampled. It's not completely accurate. It's also put into certain buckets like 400, 500, 600. A lot of the search volume keywords in clickstream tools will have lots of impressions in Search Console. So you never really know how many people search until you roll out the page, you do some PPC ads, or you check in Search Console.
One question we have from Teresa, which I think is somehow relevant. Thank you for the question, Teresa. So the question is, should we use then a few different tools and compare, like Ahrefs, Moz, Ubersuggest, and so on? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, one obvious answer to that, first of all, will be budget. I mean, I hate to kill it, but that's the truth. Probably I wouldn't purchase two very similar identical software. Let's say now SEMrush, Ahrefs. I mean, if I had the money, that would be fun to play with both, but not really needed. However, I would definitely get one extra data set for certain metrics, such as SEO visibility. It's a good idea to look in Search Console, or if you prefer Ahrefs, but I would also get a more dedicated ranking tool and check there, whatever you're using, just so you have some comparison. So Search Console, Ahrefs, perfect. Then you have two sources of data instead of just one. So yeah, in certain areas, definitely a good idea. But I wouldn't go out and purchase like an enterprise software that has very similar features. A lot of times, depending on your usage, it can be good to have one enterprise software like Ahrefs that covers most stuff. As you could see from my presentation, you can run an audit, but normally you want to get tools that are specific for each purpose. So if you want to do a crawl, well, Screaming Frog, OnCrawl, Deep Crawl, something like that. But I wouldn't go and get 3 different crawling tools, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And one thing that I will say here, and that definitely helped us, because we realized that we cannot rely on these metrics and these metrics alone to make decisions, is assign weights. Like, first of all, choose the metrics you want to you want to take into account when making decisions about something. For example, about the quality of a piece of content, right? And the quality of every piece of content in your content inventory. So then what you can do is choose a set of metrics and say that, you know what, when it comes to how I evaluate the quality of this piece of content in my content inventory, I take into account things like the number of keywords that this page is ranking for, the number of backlinks that this page has, the number of sessions that this page creates, which is kind of the vanity spectrum of things, right? But then you can also take into account things like how many leads this page created, or demo requests, depending on what your offering is, and how many customers, if you have, if you can connect content performance to customer and revenue generation through a tool like Mixpanel, right? Then after you define these metrics, what you can do is assign a weight to each of these metrics. This is what we do, by the way, in our keyword selection process and in our content audit. Assign a weight, and then, based on the weight you have assigned to each metric, and whether they are inversely proportional or directly proportional, based on their proportionality, come up with sort of an ultimate metric or a score, and make better decisions. It's not like the perfect decision. There's no perfect when it comes to online data. It's as good as it can get, right? I don't know if you've ever used any similar approaches, but that's been working really well for us.
Yeah, definitely. I love that, creating your own scoring system. The best solution is the one that's custom adapted to your business. And it's the one that you create, such as the one that you described. So I think that's great. You can see that the software vendors try to emulate that for everyone, but clearly our businesses are different. For instance, if you're running a business that's heavily focused on tech SEO, then you will need completely different focus there compared to somebody who's running a SaaS site with 1,000 pages or less. So clearly they need different recommendations. So that's the twist that you can put as an SEO. And nowadays when we have APIs, most of us are able to use BigQuery in a simple way, at least. If you combine that with the chatbots, there's so much you can do nowadays by just extracting data from different tools, putting them into Excel or Google Sheets. And yeah, like you said, George, creating your own scoring system actually makes a lot of sense. I could also add, because I saw Teresa, she mentioned Uber Suggest. Perhaps one exception when it comes to getting tools. When it comes to keyword research, I do like to have duplicates of that. Only relying on one tool, I'm sorry, I want to check at least 2-3 tools, because there's always one tool that misses so many searches. And I just feel like it's worth spending that money, because at the end of the day, a lot of times we do research based upon the searches. So yeah, that makes sense at least.
That's a good point, and I agree. I mean, and it's not like using Ahrefs and SEMrush with another tool complementary, let's say Uber Suggest or Keywords Everywhere is going to break the bank, right? So, I mean, you can do it, and I agree with you. Another point that I would like to discuss is, you mentioned technical SEO and Ahrefs' metric and score when it comes to technical SEO. Now, quick disclaimer here. I am a bit biased, negatively biased, because unless we are talking about very big websites, right? Or unless there is something that's fundamentally wrong or broken with the website, technical SEO in most cases will not, drive growth, right? And I see many people who are in the, I would say, lower stages when it comes to knowledge, right? Or earlier stage, let's say, when it comes to SEO knowledge, and who come to us and they are like, we would like to start with an audit. And I always try to explain that here's what's going to happen. We will do an audit, which, by the way, you can do by yourself, because yes, we do some manual checks as well, but most of these things that we are going to suggest come from tools that you can have access to. So why should you pay us to do it? We are going to do that. We are going to come up with a list of suggestions and fixes. You are going to have to go back to your company and ask for dev time, which we all know how these conversations usually go, right? And assuming that you get dev time, we are going to get into like a cycle of back and forths, like this is how this is going to be fixed, and they are going to open a ticket in Jira, and then they're going to fix it or not, who knows, and it's going to be an endless loop of emails and things like that. 6 months will pass by, and then at the end of this time period, we will have to show nothing for it, because, well, guess what? Organic growth doesn't like come from fixing 404s, right? I would say that this has been a vehicle for kind of retaining clients on behalf of agencies. And when you have to show and improve on a specific score, definitely helps in saying that, what, there is progress here. Yes, there is progress according to this tool, but what's the business impact of this? So nowadays we don't touch that, once again, unless we're talking about a very big website where, and we are working with such websites where technical SEO is important. But for most SaaS websites, where we talk about a couple of thousands of pages at top, right? So at most, so you don't need technical SEO there. And really improving a score based on like things like 404s and even some tags and like meta tags and so on is not going to drive an impact. I don't know what your thoughts are. I would like to hear your thoughts, but this is just my experience.
Interesting. Yeah, I largely agree. Technical SEO is kind of the foundation. If we're building a house, then this is the ground that we're building on. And if this is solid or quite good, then most likely for a lot of companies who want to see growth, they need to invest more in the content part, in the promotion part, PR, and combinations of SEO together with other teams such as social media, for instance, and the content team. This is where the big growth will happen. So unless the ground is severely problematic, probably you don't need a lot of technical SEO focus. Then, of course, there is this thing of housekeeping. Housekeeping needs to be done. Doesn't need to be done by a technical SEO specialist. Can be done by the SEO team or the agency, just to make sure that over time, the website is maintained in a healthy way. Because otherwise, over time, it could lead to problems. I think perhaps where technical SEO is moving more in the direction of the future is in business analysis or in automation, because I see a lot of interest in those areas from people who are specialists in the field. And this is where we have a shortage in the industry. Who can set up a data warehouse for even a SaaS company to make proper cross-data analysis, taking the stuff from GA, Google Search Console, Ahrefs, and combine it with metrics that we get from other tools, even from technical SEO tools. How do we do that? Well, you got to have somebody to do that. And I think also automation, setting up templates, automating it partly, perhaps using OpenAI API or something like that to speed up the process. I think that's where technical SEO can play a bigger role today, instead of, like you say, maybe only focus on this kind of whack-a-mole game. I have a lighthouse score. I am improving it. It feels good. But yeah, at the end of the line, what is the bottom line here? What's the significance? That's what you got to ask yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, we work with such clients. I mean, we have clients with, like, in some cases, millions of pages, right? And then in these cases, obviously, technical SEO is important, right? But not in the context, or not in the sense of like improving a certain number, just ensuring that everything runs smoothly, and that there are no issues on the website or like bottlenecks and roadblocks to the things that we want to achieve, right? That's all. One last point I would like to discuss, and I don't know if we have any more questions before we go and wrapping things up, but you mentioned like the first time you shared results with senior management at GetResponse, and I must say that this definitely strikes a chord, because very often we are called to, or our points of contact in the companies we are working with, they are called to like explain what we ask and why we ask it, to a CMO who is then going to ask it from their CFO, who, you know, is going to, like, or to put it differently, communicates on a different level, right? So if you go to the CFO and ask for, like, let's say a certain number, a budget for next year for this initiative, right? You have to be able, like, you have to equip your CMO with all the tools that person needs in order to be able to speak, you know, the CFO's language, which is something that most people don't understand. Because something may be important for you as an initiative. We should definitely do that because we see opportunity there, and so on and so forth. But that's not enough, especially if we are talking about bigger companies and smaller companies too, because especially, you know, smaller, scrappy companies, I mean, budgets are limited, and people need to understand that, okay, there is going to be value. There is at least potential to be value in what, you know, we are going to do. And so it's really critical in these cases to, like, speak the other person's language, right? And if you are not the one who makes these conversations on, like, a higher level, just try to equip the person who is going to make the conversation so that they can, like, you know, fight for that budget and have a strong case for it.
Yeah, totally. This is where we do ourselves such a disservice in the industry so many times. And how many SEO teams are seen as the black wizards in the marketing team? In the marketing team, this is not the position you want to have. You want to make your work really understandable. My goal is always to get people as excited and as interested as I am about what I do, but also to understand, what am I doing? It's not black magic. There are intuitive, emotional, but also experience and data-driven reasons behind decisions we make. And we should be able to share those. If we try to make a small little wizard corner that nobody understands, eventually you will disappear. And SEO today is no longer that kind of siloed team that do a certain set of things. We need to be working cross-departmentally. And you're never going to be able to do that with social media team or PR unless you explain to them, okay, link effects of a PR campaign. How do I communicate that? Well, we can improve the domain rating or the domain authority. The PR person is going to say, what is that? And if you don't know how it's calculated, she or he doesn't know how it's calculated. You need to speak the same language. But if you can explain that a link is a relation, you want to have relations and eyeballs on your press release, I want to, then now suddenly you're on the same space and you can share the budget. So SEO needs to reconnect with all of the marketing teams. And it's not just tech SEO and developers, it's SEO and every marketing team, especially if we're going to get more traffic in the coming years. I really think so.
I agree. So I guess we're running out of time. Alexander, I want to thank you very much for doing this and preparing this great presentation. This was, and I'm not saying this lightly, I'm very picky when it comes to presentations, right? Because I've done many webinars myself. So yours was really high level and very, very good. Well done. And thank you very much. For people who want to connect with you or reach out, what's the best place to do so?
Please catch me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments.
Okay, LinkedIn then. And for those of you who are still with us, make sure to go to growthways.com, which is my newsletter. I share, you can subscribe, and if you don't like the next issue, you can unsubscribe right away. But you will find, if you subscribe, you will see like the best content when it comes to B2B growth, right? Go to growthways.com and subscribe. And our website is minutia.com. For anything you may need, feel free to check us out. Alexander, thank you very much and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much, George.
Thank you, everyone.